which I love. It's a brand new industry for me, but it's pushing me to grow, which is something that I think we all need. So that is my background in a nutshell.
Hey everyone, my name is Ore Alawali. I graduated from here in 2016, majored in public relations, minor in business administration, and I interned here in the Communications and Public Affairs office. And for the past 2.5 years, I've been at my Carolina Alumni Association. So there I am the Senior Director of Communications, where I oversee social media, the graphic design, videography, working with our internal vendors and campus partners. And actually recently, I'm back in the journalism school doing my master's of strategic communication management. So I have a lot of different fields here with a student, being an alumnus, and also trying to hire students as well. So always put the plug out. I always hire videography students from the journalism school. So if you're interested in a videography internship in the fall, I'm always looking for that. But glad to be here and see what I can do. Just talk more about diversity and inclusion, how we can work together.
And I'm Renea Jameson. I am also an alum of the University of South Carolina School of Journalism and Mass Communication, so it feels good to be back. But it is very different. We did not have windows. We're in the bottom of the Coliseum, so that might give you some kind of idea of what era I was over here. But I made Columbia home, came here for college, and then something happened along the way. It was not my intention to stay in South Carolina or in Columbia, but I found it to be a great fit for me. I realized that I was in a place that required some additional molding to make it a better place, and that I could have an impact in doing that. And so actually one of the ways that I think the deal was sealed for me was when I was on the Bateman team back in God knows how long ago. And we were challenged to do a campaign around tobacco-free kids. And we found out that the Riverbank Zoo, although being our #1 attraction in the state, was still allowing people to smoke freely in the care and comfort of children and animals. And so it was a big debate rearing in the community about, was that okay or was it not? And basically our team put forth an advocacy effort and ended up making the zoo adopt the smoke-free policy, which of course remains in effect today. So I still, all these years later, I still point to that as a big turning point for me in my career and in my commitment to our city and all things that I do. So I wear a lot of hats, but I sum it up as a public relations consultant. I do have my own business and have had that business for about 10 years, but I've been involved in a lot of things, political campaigns, community outreach efforts, as well as working with small businesses and having a lot of fun along the way. So I'm here.
Well, we are very excited to have all three of you with us. I think the best way to start out with this is to define diversity. So in your own words, how would you define diversity? What is it? What does it involve?
Well, I'll jump in. So I think, and I like to define diversity and inclusion at the same time, because they're two very distinct things. And sometimes we kind of give diversity the overarching title. But diversity, my favorite quote about it is being invited to the party, and inclusion is being invited to the dance floor to actually dance. And so it's one thing to be in the room and have access. It's something else to actually have a seat at the table and for your voice to be heard and appreciated. Especially for communities who have often been disadvantaged or have not had those opportunities, it really is important that those spaces be created so that we can be heard and we can be seen.
So I'll jump in, and so I like the dance floor analogy, and so I'm going to use a cake analogy that actually I just heard from one of my coworkers that really resonated with me. And he said, when you're baking a cake, you don't celebrate the fact that you have all the ingredients, right, in your pantry stocked. You celebrate when you bake the cake. So diversity is gathering your ingredients, but baking the cake is inclusion. And that is a really critical part. But I would take it a step further and say you need to have equity on top of that. Because you include everyone, but then when you look at where everyone is it equal? Is it fair? And a lot of times we're not seeing that in our personal lives, in the workplace. So for me, it really is those three. It's diversity, it's inclusion, and it's equity. And it's making sure that when we bring our authentic selves to the table, we're being acknowledged, we're being respected, and we're being valued.
I wish I had a good analogy, but those are really good. But I would say definitely it's a representation, but as you all have said, it's going past the representation, saying how do people actually have a voice in a situation? How do they actually move a company or an organization forward? So they're not just there to be the stock photo on your organization webpage. They're actually there to help and be part of what makes a company who it is or what it's seeking to do.
So to take it one step further, how has your experiences in your life surrounding diversity and inclusivity been? Personally, career-wise, etc.?
Well, I think my story is not really unique. I think a lot of us have experienced that, where from elementary school to high school to many of my college classes, my first on-air TV job, boardrooms I've been in, I've often been the only one. And it's hard not to notice that, but you learn to not let that define who you are or get in the way of your confidence and what you bring to the table. So I think in a lot of aspects, it can be humbling to realize that you're sort of on this path, and you may be by yourself. And I think I've had to be challenged to embrace the differences that I bring to the table, and not get caught up in being the only one. And sometimes that can be difficult. And also realizing that just because I've worked so hard for something and I feel like I've earned something, doesn't mean I'm gonna get it. And that was a big slap in the face for me, because you're always taught, you go to school, you get good grades, you work really hard, and then you're supposed to get it. You're supposed to accomplish your dreams, and then when it doesn't happen, you wonder, well, what's wrong with me? And sometimes it's difficult to prove the reasoning behind why that doesn't happen. But again, with the diversity and the inclusion, it's not always about, okay, you're given something. It's were you given the opportunity to get to where you want to be? Because I'm not mad if you don't choose me for something, but don't deny me the opportunity to just be at that table. And sometimes you have to take the initiative to make room for yourself at that table, because you're not always going to be invited in. But if you have the work ethic, and if you know who you are and you're confident in your abilities, then you can surely make room.
I think for me, just being able to not be discouraged, starting in, and I see a lot of people who are in communications field or higher up management who look like me. So it's like, well, how can I get to that area? I don't see many people who are represented. So for me, it was just knowing that, if I'm putting in the work and if I actually care about what I'm doing, it's going to happen. And I also have people in my corner, like my professors and other internship supervisors that help me along the way, be like, okay, if you want to get here, here's how we can help you. We know there's not a lot of diversity in your field and inclusion of every other people, but we want to get to that point where we know our field can expand. So for me, just knowing that if I'm putting in the work, then it's going to happen, even though I'm not seeing that representation right away. I know there's other people in my corner who are helping me to get where I want to be.
And I definitely agree with both of them. I've had very similar experiences. And I think the other side of the table, the ugly side or the challenging side, is that, when you are the one, then you have to represent for everyone. And you don't have the luxury to fail. And that is a lot of weight. And you have to recognize along that process that it is okay to stumble sometimes, that it is okay to give yourself the grace that you need, and self-care is very important, because when you know that when you walk in the room or when you speak up, that you not only represent yourself, your family, but your entire community, you take that seriously, or at least I have. And with that, I also continue to work very hard to create those spaces for others behind me to lift others up along the way. And so I'm willing to blaze the trail and set the stage, but also making sure that I'm bringing others along the process and creating a roadmap for them. But sometimes I would say even today, some boards that I serve on, I literally am still there because I don't have my replacement yet. And I know that if I'm not in the room, that the things that need to be said won't be said. And so I have to make sure that I make those meetings a priority, and I have to make sure that I show up until I can find somebody that's willing to step in when I'm ready to step away. But that like I said, that's kind of the hard side of it, because you feel like you have to be, I'm a black woman, we talk about black girl magic, but the flip side of black girl magic is that's hard work to have to be pulling the rabbits out the hat all the time, and for people to expect that you're always going to be on point and ready and have it all together, and you've got the weight of the world on your hands at the same time. So I definitely have been thankful for the opportunities that I've been able to create for others along the way, but it's hard work. And I think I'm at the point now where we talk about self-care a lot, but I'm trying to take those lessons in for myself and make sure I'm doing what I need to do for me.
I saw a little bit of a TED Talk the other day about diversity and inclusivity, and something that was said that really stuck with me was you can walk into a boardroom of any Fortune 500 company and it would be all white men, and that's not weird. But if it was not all white men, that would be weird. So where do you think we need to start changing things? What do you think we need to start doing? If it's not your company, which company? What are the first steps?
I think knowing right off the bat that you can't judge someone based upon what you think they're gonna just do. You actually have to listen to them, learn from them, and that's when you actually have that conversation, because a lot of the times it's like, I just see you, so I think I know who you are, I know your life story, but you don't know anyone's life story, whether they're white, black, gay, straight, it keeps going on. I think that's honestly one of the biggest things, just being able to listen to people and then have the conversation. Like, just don't think you can have that conversation like this is how it's going to be. You have to listen to them, and then from there, that's when you can have those mutual connections and actually see what they can bring to the table.
And, I just mentioned, now we don't have a whole lot of Fortune 500 companies in town, but we do have a lot of nonprofits. And that's the very similar thing that you see on many boards, and whether it be corporation boards or even just our local nonprofits. And the interesting thing there is oftentimes there is not a reflection of the community that's being served or of the constituency that those groups are serving. And so I think that it starts with us. I'm very impressed with what I'm seeing tonight. The fact that this was open to not just University of South Carolina students, but I saw some Columbia College students, Benedict College students, but really breaking down the walls and these imaginary barriers that we've put up, that you've got to stay in this lane and be in this box or check that box. But the reality, as you said, people are deeper and wider and stronger than just what might constitute what we have to check on a census box. And so it's really, I think this generation is helping to blow up what I think was one of our problems in my generation when I was growing up. I was post the civil rights movement, and so no longer living in official segregation, but what I did experience was we were then taught that this is a melting pot and everyone is equal and we're all the same, and you don't want to stick out because you don't want to be different. And the reality is I am different, and I want you to see me for who I am and recognize that I have something valuable to say, and I bring my personal story to the table. And so I think that you all are getting it right, and I think that as you continue to create the stories that we'll see in our mass communication and in our boardrooms and companies, I think that you will help us continue to shake up that frame that I think has put us in those boxes.
And for me, I think it also boils down to mentorship and sponsorship. When you have people like Rania who are holding your place in line, who are willing to help you chart your course, who are willing to help you teach you their lessons and their mistakes to help you on your way, I think that is incredibly important. But I also think the sponsorship piece is critical, because not only do you need mentors and guides, you need someone who's going to actually advocate for you behind closed doors. Someone who's going to listen to you and care for you and be able to help you along. It's not preferential treatment. It's acknowledging your skills, that you are valuable, that you're going to add to this company, this business, this nonprofit, and we're going to help you get there. So for me, I think it's a combination of the mentorship and sponsorship.
I mean, we can talk until we're blue in the face about how amazing diversity and inclusivity is and like that we need it, but why? It's such an easy question, like it should come straight to your head. Why do we need to fight for this? Like, how do we explain why this is important today?
I think it's easy. It makes us better. You know, when you look at companies who really embrace true inclusion, you know, they make a better product, they make wiser decisions, you know, people feel good about working there, people feel good about spending their money there, and so it just makes good sense all the way around. We can't get past the fact that, you know, our history is that, and it has created some political and societal issues that have us look at race and culture in some very complex ways. And so we can't negate that, but I am just a firm believer that everyone's story is valuable and everyone has something to bring to the table. And when you look at situations like Gucci a couple of weeks ago, you know, releasing that sweater, or H&M last year, you know, releasing the ads with the kids, the reality is when you don't have those important real conversations behind doors or people in the room that can make those decisions and say, wait a minute, that's crazy. That is not going to go the way you think it's going to go, or when I see that, I see this. And so even if the diversity is there, if people are in the room and they feel like they can't speak up to say the truth, then you're putting forth a product or you're putting forth an image that again defeats the purpose. So I really believe that, you know, it's up to us to shake it up. It's up to us to be at the table. It's up to us to speak up. It's not easy, but I think in the end, when those things happen, it makes us who we really are. It's a true reflection of our actual community, of our United States of America, if we can be who we really are supposed to be. When I think about places I like to travel, I don't like to go to places where everything, and excuse this pun here, but is black and white, right? I like to experience, you know, different flavors and different colors and different experiences from the sounds and the sights, and, you know, just have a true experience that's multi-level. And I think that's what the best things are about America. Typically when we travel, we don't just want to see, you know, the road and the street sign and the building. You know, we want to see more. We want to see the public art. We want to, you know, we want to experience culture. And so I think we all feel better when we can have that seat at the table, that voice, and know that we're all doing the right thing, and it makes good sense on the dollar side too.
I think Renee said it all. Sorry. I use it as an example.
It was an amazing answer. Yeah. But Renee, you said something earlier that kind of clicks with one of my later questions. We learned in PR management about the principle of requisite variety. And this states that a company should represent its audience, its publics, in every way, shape, or form. Now, where you guys work, do you see that today? Do you, like, it's what we learn in our education, but do you actually see that in the real world?
I have to say, where I work, no, just because we're such a small organization, we have like 16 people on our staff. So out of those 16, 3 African American, half of them are women, and that's pretty much it. But we know, like, the University of South Carolina, well, for those who know, I work at the My Carolina Alumni Association, and we know that the alumni base is very broad. Like, it's not just, like I said, black and white. So we know that there's different constituents we have to work with, but internally, it's just because we have such a small staff that it's not all made up of all the different types of people we have at the university. But we're working with that. We have like affinity groups like Black Alumni Council, Young Alumni Council, and a Veterans Alumni Council, and we're here what other people, what other alumni have to say. So we're in the works to have a Latino Alumni Council, an LGBTQ Alumni Council. So the point is, like, we're hearing what people have to say, and we're trying to be part of that conversation, and we're trying to just hear what they have to do so we can get where we want to be as a university overall.
And I would say the Boeing Company definitely reflects the people, the customers that it serves. I can speak for the North Charleston site where I work, and I always like to say it's like a little city because we have so many people who work there. And when you walk on site, from the mechanics who build the airplanes to the engineers who design them, it reflects the state of South Carolina. We have to wear team wear, which is what I'm wearing now, and it says Boeing on one side, and then it says Made with Pride in South Carolina. And this goes so much beyond just a motto. We really live it and we believe it. And when we walk into the community, it's just infectious. And it's not because we're a major manufacturer, created thousands of jobs in the community, but it's because we live with pride each and every day. And the people in the community love to stop and say, oh, you work at Boeing, what do you do? We love Boeing, thank you for being here. And we see that reflected in our community. And so we not only have loyalty to our job and to building the airplane, but also to the community in which we serve. So we have the affinity groups as well. We're out there volunteering in the community. We work with HBCUs and other colleges and universities. So we're not just there building these great planes. We're there because we're committed to the community and we want to be a part of it.
And again, I'm not at a larger employer. I am my employer, and but I have various clients that I work with, and I would say that when I look at the span of those clients, everything from the folks at the State House to our county council chambers to the City of Columbia chambers, and then throughout various businesses and organizations in town, we still have a lot of work to do. I consider myself to be an ongoing learner. I think that it's important to never stop learning. So whether I'm getting a degree or not, I think that there's still things that can be learned every day. And last year I had an opportunity to work for the Obama Foundation, and I had probably one of the most diverse groups, I would venture to say, among those in the cities that they worked in. And I was so blessed to learn even more about challenges that our DACA recipients are currently facing. And thinking that, I was well read on it is one thing, but actually hearing someone's story who talked about them being number 2 in their graduating class, but because they were a DACA recipient, they could not receive any financial aid or scholarship money that they qualified for, and so they were not able to continue their education because they would have had to pay out-of-state tuition for in-state schools, and it was just really a horrible thing. And then to, you hear these stories about, let's say, take that a step further, the fact that their parents were undocumented, right? And you hear, why they should be here or why they shouldn't, and if that's fair or not. But just hearing the story of the fact that a 20-year-old male could not feel free to go out to hang out and have a good time at the bar and have a good night on the town because they knew that if they got in trouble, that their whole family would be in jeopardy. Those kind of stories are around us all the time, but people are just, trying to button up and keep it straight and or assimilate to what's going on, and so you don't always get a chance to really get the real deal. And so I think that we've got to continue to have dialogue and ask people about their backgrounds, and no matter what those stories are, they're important, and everyone has a story, and so no matter what your story is, there is space for it. There's space for your voice. And so I think that there's definitely still work to be done in terms of my personal outreach and who I try to affiliate myself with. I really, as I said, try to remain a learner. So, I know that I don't know every nook and cranny or personality around, but I definitely try to make sure I make those connections and get individual stories as I go along my life.
I think a big part of growing in the professional world is when you're in college or when you have your first internship, who you look up to. Who was your mentor when you first started out? Was it a teacher? Was it a first boss? Who inspired you to be who you are today?
I'll start first. I've got a lot, but when I think back to the days in the No Window Coliseum, there was Bonnie Juniani, and she was an amazing advertising professor who really, I think, saw much more in me and or recognized the importance of connecting me with opportunities that I might not have known about, and really just kind of staying on my behind to get things done. So if it was an application for a program, she stayed on me. She cared enough to make sure that she followed up with me, and those things made a difference. So she's one of the first I could think of, but I've got countless, but that's definitely one of the ones that I think is important.
For here, she's a current professor. I would say Lisa Sisk. I had her for first nonprofit PR. Yeah. But I would have to say, like, going into class, I was kind of just taken aback, just trying to get my grade. But she really honed in on me and asked me what I wanted to do after I graduate, because at the time it was my senior year. And she was telling me this is the opportunities you can get involved with. And she recruited me to be in her public relations campaigns class. And from there, that's when I really got to delve more into my major and actually get more experience. And eventually, like, she was able to be a reference for me for other jobs, especially for the job I have now. She was a reference, but she was in my corner. And I feel like that's something I would always suggest. All of you that you get to know your professors, they really do want to help you out, and they're in your corner. If you're interested in something, an internship or specific career, they would be there for you. So I actually did not feel like I got that experience as much when I was in undergrad, because I was just like flying by. But now that I'm in grad school, I'm trying to get to know all my professors and just have a more deeper relationship, but just know they are here for you, because I had the experience of having a great professor that mentored me and got me to where I am now. And then second would be my internship supervisor. Her name's Peggy Burnett. I interned about Office of Communications and Public Affairs. And she helped me with just knowing how I wanted to go within my communications degree, especially for being there for 1 year. She was like, okay, you can work with Mike Carolina for a bit, and I worked with them for my internship. But she even made the point that, they're trying to get younger, they're trying to get a little bit more diverse. I was like, well, I don't know if I'll be there, but I actually helped them with their hurricane relief and the opening of the building. And by the time I graduated, I didn't have a job lined up, but because they had remembered me from my internship with Mike Carolina, they called me in for an interview, and I started part-time and then worked my way up, and then I got to the position I am now. So those connections really do matter. That's what's gotten me to where I am now.
So I'll bring up two, and one is going to sound weird, but one is someone I don't really know that well, or I should say she doesn't know me that well, but still she had a big impact on my life. When I first got into the TV news business, I was in high school, and I had an internship, and I learned how to edit. And the woman I saw on TV, I'm from Connecticut, was Gayle King. And so seeing her and seeing her career, seeing how hard she worked every day really pushed me to say, Megan, you can do this. When I was in high school, middle school even. So she had a profound impact on my life. I've had the pleasure of meeting her a few times. Again, I know she doesn't remember me, but that's okay. We're close in my heart. But no, and I think you need those role models to tell you sometimes that it's possible. Even though we know it, it's good to see someone else who's kind of paved the path. So she's definitely one. And then I've had a lot of really close friends and colleagues who gave me some critical advice when I was making the transition from television to PR and to now internal communications. Because that was a very scary time for me, because my whole life, from Gayle King on, was I'm going to be a TV news anchor. That's going to be my life. I'm going to retire from that. My parents worked on their jobs for 30 plus years. That's going to be my job. I'm going to work, and then I'm going to retire from it. I'm going to be really happy. But then when life doesn't always go the way you plan, and you wonder, well, what's next? What can I do? I had some really good people in my corner to tell me, Megan, you can still do this. You can transition from TV. You can use the skill set you have. You can go into a brand new industry you know nothing about and still excel. So it's so important to have people like that to let you know that you can do this. Because oftentimes, I know I'm probably not alone, I'll look at my resume, I'll look at the job posting and say, well, I don't really have all of that. I maybe have like 85%. So let me just hold off and not apply. But there are other people who look at it, it's like, oh, well, I have maybe one thing on here, like, want you to send it in, right? And then they get the job. You're like, wait. Exactly. So waiting until you're ready doesn't always work because you can grow into positions. So that's something that I've had to learn and I'm growing into, and that's all thanks to the mentors that I've had.
So in some situations, it seems it's not what you know, it's who you know. One of the things that we would love to see is a pipeline between students and professionals. How would you recommend going about that?
Well, I'll get to that answer, but I just do want to underscore a couple of topics we just highlighted. Internships truly are vital. It gives you an opportunity to test out the ground and decide if that's really the path you want to take. And then it also helps to get your foot in the door. And so I know for me, my first real job out of college was because of my internship connections. And although I did not work full time for the folks who employed me as their intern, they were the voices that got my foot in the door for the full-time job that I had right after college. The mentoring piece, I think, is such an important piece because it's amazing how quickly you can create your own path and be creative with it when your learning curve is shortened. And that's what mentors allow you to do. They come to you and they tell you the pitfalls and they tell you where the cracks are in the sidewalk and the dips in the road so that you don't have to worry about that and you can be creative to take it to the next level. And so I think that at every stage along the way, and even when you think you've arrived, still keep your eyes open and pay attention to who can continue to help you grow and elevate to the next level. And so I guess getting to your question, what can be done? I think looking at opportunities for great collaboration like I'm seeing tonight, working with other institutions, I think is very plausible. But also, reaching out to folks in town. Sometimes we end up hearing from the same voices and seeing the same faces all the time because it might be strong connections that professors or staff members have with people. But, just picking up the phone and talking to people and inviting folks in. Most of the time, people like me, we're anxious to come back and share information and make those connections. Or if I know of an opportunity, I'm very willing to share that. So I would say just continue on the path you're on, for lack of a very structured answer for you.
Yeah, events like this is one of the great ways to meet people. And I also say, don't be afraid to reach out. As a student, I would get the business cards come in, and I'm like, I want to reach out and get them for coffee or lunch. I'm like, they might not have time. I'm just a student. Like, what do I know? But now I'm on the other side of it, and I love when students reach out to me for an internship or if they just want to get lunch or coffee. Like, I'm always here to help. So I think don't be afraid to reach out because more than likely people are trying to help you out and they want to get you to succeed as well.
Yeah, and I know you want to jump in, but I just want to say something about that. At this stage, y'all are the big deal. I wish that I was a student and not having to worry about all the adulting that we have to worry about. And so it's so refreshing to be able to say, wow, I remember when. And so we love to be able to break away from the monotony and have that lunch or that quick conversation, or even if it's a quick email, even if I can't get back to you right now, just the fact that I know I've been where you are, so I know how you feel, and it's invigorating for me to know that, okay, I can help create some pathways for some folks behind me.
Well, really the only thing that I want to add is to take the initiative and always make sure you follow up. I mean, I know we always have the best intentions, but they don't always turn into action. So make sure you take advantage of all the resources you have in front of you.
Now, to tie this back into diversity and inclusivity, how do you see a pipeline like this helping those efforts?
I think it's important, just as Megan said, looking at Gayle King on TV, it's important to see yourself. I have a speech about what you see and can learn from heroes, and one of the first things is they see themselves winning before they begin. So to truly see those people who are in those roles make all the difference. I had an amazing experience a few weeks ago, heading out to Phoenix to the book tour that Michelle Obama was doing across the world, really the world, and reading her book. I just knew, seeing her step onto the stage and walk into the White House, that, you know, she represented me and my people, and, you know, the young girl in me that was like the young girl in her. But really, when I sat down and heard her story and learned about, you know, the fact that she was an inner city young girl who had to travel on a city bus to go across town for the magnet programs that she was a part of, and the fact that she had family members who were, you know, some were crazy and some were very eccentric and others were super smart and many were disadvantaged. You know, as I heard her story, I realized more and more that she was me and I was her, and like, if she can be the top woman in the world, you know, what else can I do, you know? And that comes to mind today because that was about 2 weeks ago. I just got my official picture back, and I sent it to my husband, and he immediately texted back and he said, I am so happy that Michelle Obama got an opportunity to meet you. Oh. And, you know, I was just like, but seriously, the truth of the matter is, you know, knowing that you can see yourself in other stories, and they don't necessarily actually have to look like you. You know, at the bare minimum, when you cut everything back, we all want the same thing. We want children to be able to grow up loved and nurtured and be able to be the best that they could be. We want air that we can breathe and live off of, and food and water that we can drink and nourish ourselves. And so we all want the same things when we cut through all of the politics and the hoopla of everything else. And so it's so important to let your story shine in whatever way that is. You have an important story, you matter, and even when you feel lonely along the way, you have to be reminded that you are important and you're here for a reason. And so don't ever shy away from sharing your story and lifting it up, because you don't know who else is paying attention to you. People are watching even when you think they're not.
That's such a powerful aspect of the story, because I think when you have people like us up here or other people who are doing panels, people like to focus on all the success. But it hasn't been very easy to get where I am, and I had to apply for probably like 20 jobs before I got here. So I think having those stories of like, okay, if I'm talking to someone, I know where they are right now because they're successful, but how did they get there? What was their struggle? What did they have to do? Who did they have to talk to? Those real life situations that actually help people see, okay, I'm struggling right now, but I see what they did to get where they are right now.
And I think, so we talked a little bit about the onus being on us, right, to reach out and follow up, and how that helps with the pipeline, but the onus is also on the companies to do that reaching out as well, to make sure they're going into the colleges and to make sure they're targeting the population that they would like to see reflected in their workforce. So you need to have that, and I also think so when I think about the pipeline, I think back to Boeing and how we have this program called Dream Learners. We bring in students from high schools all across South Carolina, and we expose them to what it means to work at Boeing. And it's not just, you can be a mechanic, or you can be an engineer, or you could be a pilot. You can be like me and work in communications. So it's exposing them to all the different aspects, but we are proactively reaching out. We're proactively going into all the counties in South Carolina to make sure that everyone knows what our company does, because we want them to see themselves in us, so that when they are of the age where they can apply, they can think back to their experience at Boeing and say, you know what, there's a place for me. We're welcomed here.
And I remember, just side note, when I came to USC, they had a minority welcome weekend. And I remember coming in the Russell House, and Tommy Preston, who works at Boeing, he was talking about how he came to USC, what he did to make the most of it. And I was like, man, look at him, he's up there, he's very young, and look at what he made from USC. And then after I graduated, I started working at Mike Carolina, and then Tommy was our first African-American millennial president. So just seeing that full circle moment of how people, like you said, how the company can actually invest in the community, and how that actually that like story, it just kept with me, and now being able to work with him and see what he did, that's very impactful.
At this point, I would love to open up the floor. Does anyone have any questions?
At what point did any of y'all realize that the mentors that helped you get along the way, when did you feel like you were using the tools that they gave you, or like the moments that you connected with them and you started being able to pass those on to people after you, or someone who came after you? Like, you're like, well, I remember when so-and-so helped me out and now I want to pass this on. What are some of those moments for y'all? Well, that's not particularly pertaining to diversity and inclusion.
I think that's part of who I am. I was the only child for 11 years, and I was, as I mentioned, I talked about South Carolina and coming here and kind of not expecting to stay here. Well, I'm originally from Philadelphia, and finished my formative years there, but moved to Charleston, South Carolina. But particularly when I was in Philadelphia, I lived in an inner city neighborhood. We know it from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air as West Philadelphia, born and raised, right? But the reality is, he made it sound really glamorous in his little intro to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but it was pretty rough when I was living there, and it's still kind of some parts. But the thing about it is, again, I talked about kind of having that burden of the family and of the community on myself. And so I stopped going to my neighborhood schools when I was in kindergarten. When I was in kindergarten, the teacher actually pulled my mother to the side and said, "Do not bring her back here next year. She's too smart. She's not going to get what she needs here. Don't bring her back here. Don't tell anybody I told you this, but don't bring her back here." And so at first grade, I started going to school out of my zone, and it wasn't a magnet school at that time, but it was another area school where I had to take a city bus to get there. And so I kind of recognized very early on that I was bringing something back to my community, to my friends that I played with every day, double dutch and jacks and other things. And so for me, almost from the very beginning that I can remember, I've always been, bringing things back and opportunities back. So I'm also that girl where, you probably got to have a certain personality to travel with me, or I will drive you crazy. Because when I go to a place, I want to feel like I've been there. If I never get back there again, that I've experienced it. So I have it all mapped out and planned from the time we hit the ground. And oftentimes my friends will be like, "Well, did you take time out for us to eat? We're doing all these wonderful things, but we do need to eat." So I say that to say, I'm always really trying to find ways to dig deep, figure out what's going on, and connect the dots and plug people in. So that's part of my nature. So as long as I can remember, if there was an opportunity I had, going back to the days of the J School, when I went through the internship programs I went through, I was maybe like the third student that went through this amazing program in New York. And so when I came back, I let everybody know, look, you guys need to take advantage of this. It's a good pay. It's a wonderful opportunity. And anybody else after that. So that's kind of who I am, and I'm always looking for. So you ask the question. If you want to know if I've got an answer or a part of an answer, I'm going to do my best to make sure I give you that information.
Okay, I have a question. Oh, wasn't always good. You had your hand up first.
Yeah, I just have a question about sort of being the only one that you guys talked about. Do you have any tips for being the only one and walking into a space where I guess you are the only one? It's sort of like, I call it kind of the invisible cloak syndrome, because it's almost like you walk into a space and like you're unseen, which is ironic because maybe you're the only, black or brown face in the room, but it's like you have to work harder to be seen. I've been in situations, I've been at networking events where people will position their body like literally away from me and talk to the rest of the group, and I'm just there like do you even see me? Like, I'm here, but sometimes it feels like they're wearing an invisible cloak. So do you guys have any tips for that?
That's a big one. I think first it starts with having the confidence in yourself. And you really can't let that body language or even words that people say to you, or sometimes the unspoken words that you know, like they're thinking, you can't let that influence your psyche and influence your actions. So I really think it starts in the mental before anything else. And then I think if you're in a room and you're by yourself and you have no one, I think that's also a time where you get that pep talk from your mentor ahead of time to kind of build you up and help you propel yourself through that, sometimes the awkward moments when you're in that room and you're just, and either no one's approaching you, no one's talking to you, or you just feel invisible. But that would be my advice, which is not great.
I have like the feeling like anything that happens, whether it's positive, negative, it's an experience and you learn from. So I definitely have had that experience where I've been the only one and I didn't feel comfortable. And then I look back on it and I'm like, well, what experience did I get from that? Of course, maybe someone, I didn't feel comfortable, but what could I have done better to actually achieve what I wanted? So it is definitely like, when you first start out, it's not gonna be comfortable. It's always gonna be like, wait, what am I doing? Am I really here? But just know that everything is a learning experience. And if you just keep on going, then you do have that confidence, whichever way that happens.
And I would just echo that it's important to go in with a mission before you walk in the door, and don't forget why you're walking in the door. So if it is to connect with someone about an opportunity, or if it's to learn more about the information that the other folks in the room have, or if it's just to represent and connect. It's important to stay focused on why you're there, what your mission is, and then to be confident in that. And it's not always an easy thing, but you do have this. It doesn't take you long for you to send a quick text message to a supportive friend or mentor. I just the other day, maybe yesterday, I received a text from someone who said, you know, I can't believe I walked into this business setting and I am the only one. And, you know, I had to kind of quickly respond to help them get back in the moment. But again, you just stay focused about what you, and again, I know that's easier said than done, but you have to be focused on what you're there for. Just like I remember my teachers used to tell me way back in elementary school that, you know, I've got my degrees, you know, you have to get the information, you know, so if you're not being proactive and if you're shying away, sometimes it can also just be, it can be, you know, you may be mistaken and or reading things a little differently because it's not your comfort zone. And so when you walk out of your comfort zone, it is uncomfortable. And so it's okay, but you've got to just be strong enough to just face it. And if at the end of the day, you know, it's a horrible experience, there's something you've learned there as well. You know exactly who you don't want to deal with. And that way you, so either I need to be the one to call them on it, or I won't be doing business with them, and I dare not allow someone I care and love to consider going that way. So there's lessons learned no matter what the path is.
Thank you.
That was my question. Hi, I'm Natalie. I work for Girls on the Run in Columbia. It's a nonprofit organization, and we target a very diverse group of girls starting at a very young age. Do y'all have any tips on making or ensuring that our girls succeed in life, just going forward?
That's a great organization. I'm a member of the Junior League of Columbia, and we support Girls on the Run. And I love the fact that it's such a, it's more about the self-esteem building than it is about finishing the race, right? And or preparing for the race. So great organization. But I think, you know, the way that your model is set up, you know, allowing young girls to see women thriving and to be encouraged by other peers and those that are older than them, I think is a wonderful model. But I think we also have to do things like that, taking time to speak to the next generation and remind them that you are worthy, you are beautiful, you are brilliant, you are talented, and you are worthy of being at any table and fighting any fight or getting in any race that you believe you want to be in. And I support you wholeheartedly with that. Now, I might not be able to get out there and run with you the whole time, but I can definitely sit on the sidelines and cheer you on. And so I think that that message is universal across the board all the time. And so I think that, you know, as you're looking at young girls, our psyche is very fragile. And so it's very important that we are continuously lifting up our young ladies from an early age on to remind them about their brilliancy and their beauty and their intelligence. Unfortunately, we're still in an environment, in a community that teaches young girls to be pretty princesses, and teaches our boys to be brave, and we've got to change that. And we've really got to teach our young ladies that if they do see themselves in 75% of the job requirements, that they take that leap and apply, versus sitting back and making sure they got to have 110% of what they see written there before they even put their name in the hat. So you see that with even our change in our demographics with people in elected official positions. You know, you see more women that are stepping up and running. But usually when you get down to ask them, it's not because like when I was I wanted to be the da-da-da-da-da. It's about relationships. And it's about somebody seeing in them the fact that, you know what, you are a great leader and we need you. And then them being able to say, dang, I wanted to go home, but I guess I'll go on over here to the State House and do this thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, mentorship is just so key, especially nowadays, having someone who knows is in your corner, whether you can talk to, quick, like you said, like a text, just knowing on those bad days, good days, you can have someone who's always in your corner and he lifts you up. So I think what you're doing is great, and I can't wait to see what you guys continue to do.
And I do want to say one more thing. I even tell my very polished politicians and leaders of organizations that it is great to have people who are very, very supportive, but also make sure you have someone in your corner who's not your yes man. Have somebody that can keep it real with you and be honest and tell you about the things that you need to tighten up and straighten up when those times are necessary. It's easy to just listen to all the fanfare and to listen to all the good things. It's harder to actually do the work to make those adjustments along the way. So, you know, I'm not saying keep a negative Nancy constantly in your ear that brings you down, but I am saying make sure you have somebody that, you know, does know how to just be really honest with you, even if that honesty is something that's a little difficult to swallow.
Well, and to piggyback off that, sometimes that person may not look like you, and that's okay. I mean, it's good to have those people that look like us, that we know that they've gone through similar struggles, but sometimes there are people who may have not experienced some of the same things, who can still be a great proponent for you, or be that person who can tell you, you know what, you really need to work on X, Y, and Z. So just be open when you're looking at people who you can get advice from. And also knowing when that person may not be the right person for you anymore. You know, everyone sometimes comes in your life for a season, for a reason, and there could be a time where, you know, this mentor was great for this particular job or for this particular stage I was going through, but, you know, I need to move on to someone else, or then you need to then become the mentor to someone else and pass along what you've learned.
So I really like how y'all brought that into the picture. I think throughout my time here at USC, I've been able to be a part of a lot of different teams and a lot of different student groups, and one of the big things that I really like looking for in a team is someone with an opposing opinion. And I don't know when it was, maybe it was my junior year, I was like, you know what, not to just like start a ruckus or anything, but I'm gonna be that guy to offer at least a different opinion or a different, you know, not to say that this is wrong or anything, but what if this was another way we could go about it? Does the group want to think about that? You know, want to offer input? And, you know, I also like, I was able to read a book one time, it was the 5 dysfunctions of the team. And one of them was like, if you don't have a group of people who are just willing to say, all right, well, you know, I don't quite like this about this idea, or I do like this about it, but not so much this. You're not fleshing out all the possibilities that could be at the end of the run, and at least if you have different views, people from different corners of campus, from different backgrounds, they're going to give you a point of view that you may not have previously considered. And so anytime I'm looking for a team, I really appreciate people who, like you said, they may not be there to be a Debbie Downer per se, but like they're there to just say, well, have you considered this? Because when we're comfortable with who we got around us, maybe that's the time to find a new team, because standing on your toes isn't a bad thing. It just makes you work out your toes a little bit more.
And as leaders, I think it's so important that you do create that structure where everyone does feel like they can speak against. Because, sometimes people just go along because they don't feel like their voice really matters, or that they're going to be pounced on if they really speak up and offer a different point of view. So as the leaders of different groups and organizations, it's up to you to make sure that people feel comfortable enough to be able to do just that. But I think that's when you get your best work, when you've thought through what all the possibilities could be, and then you come out with whatever your finished product is, versus being like Gucci and saying, oh, that black on the, the lips look good on that, and putting it out for sale, and then you've just ostracized a whole lot of people and a whole lot of dollars.
Yeah, I think also just going on that point, when you're also with the same people, then you're getting to a bubble. Then how do you grow if you're always having the same yes people? Everyone's also doing the same thing. So that's probably been some of the most challenging things for me, is like working with different people, not in a bad ways, because we all have different opposing views. That when it comes together, we're able to actually execute a communications campaign, because we thought of, okay, how is this person going to affect, or have we thought about reaching out to this audience? So it can be a little uncomfortable, but that's how we grow, when we have those different viewpoints.
Going from that, how do you, as a leader, make the environment comfortable to speak your mind, to have the people who have opposing views feel comfortable to speak up and say something? I know we talked about how you always feel like you need to be buttoned up and you don't want to step out. So what are some ways that you can do that to make the environment more comfortable for everyone?
I think you need to encourage everyone around you to bring their authentic self to the table. And if you, as the leader, you're surveying and you're seeing, well, someone is not sharing, you need to lead by example. You need to make sure that that person is feeling comfortable enough to share who they are and what they're bringing to this conversation, and make sure that it's going to be respected and acknowledged. So you can't, as a leader, be in your own bubble and feel like, well, I'm just going to give all my ideas and I'll just take what the majority is saying. You need to look for those people who maybe are not speaking up as much, or the opinions you don't see represented in the room, and seek that out. And I think that would make you a better, more well-rounded leader, and more inclusive of all ideas.
And more equitable.
More equitable, yes.
Question in the far back.
This was great, thank you. Who do you really wish was here to hear this?
Other than
I would love to see more men in the room. I would love to see more men for sure. I would love to see. I can think of, I know things have changed, but I can think of some classes that were a lot larger than this. So I think it's important that, these conversations don't just happen in those bubbles, and that we're not only talking to other groups that have felt disenfranchised and have felt like we've not been a part, but those who are experiencing the amazing levels of privilege that our society has set up for them in our institutions. And so I think it's important that this conversation be as diverse as the diversity needs to be. And so, I would love to see that from my viewpoint.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you hopeful about what you're seeing and it trending toward a better place as far as diversity and inclusion?
From my perspective, I am hopeful, just because I feel people have become a little bit more comfortable voicing ideas, having that, that inclusion in the room. but also how we work with each other when we're working on different campaigns from my perspective, because we include different people like Black, African American, or same thing, but we also have like LGBT, and also something that I also was big on was my previous boss who had MS. So disabilities was something I never really had the experience about, because you kind of think if you have a disability, you're just in a wheelchair. But I was opened up to what a disability is, how that can affect you, and how some people need to have that voice when it comes to different campaigns and different initiatives. So really just learning what people's story is, because you really can't tell when you look at people.
And I mean, just especially coming back here, you know, I remember again being in the seats that you're in, and I remember some of the feelings I would have in certain classes, and so I am extremely hopeful. I'm very, very optimistic, and I've already seen a wonderful shift. When I was here at the University of South Carolina, right in our backyard, the State House grounds was a place that I did not feel comfortable going anywhere near, let alone put a toe on. And so, you know, just the fact that now it's been a very challenging route to where we are today, that has of course been a result of some bloodshed and some other horrible things, but the end result is I can walk on the State House grounds, I can go stop by the African American History Monument with my 5-year-old son who does not have that history, and he can feel just at home there as he would at any park or monument or other historical site that is supposed to be for him. And so I am extremely hopeful. I feel like the fact that we have moved beyond that melting pot mentality, that we all have to just melt down who we are and come in and blend together, and everybody's hair and everybody's clothes and everything has to be very, very similar, to the point where, you know, you can show up as your authentic self, a 5-foot frame, you know, 100+ pound, big gut, bright colored young lady, and be appreciated and heard. You know, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. But again, I think it takes the strong leaders that we have in the classroom. It takes you all as leaders in your organizations and in your work to just continue to make it a point to truly let people be who they need to be and who they really are, and accept them for who they are, so that we can all be better together.
And I'm also hopeful because of all the conversations that are being had, all the people who are being empowered to make a difference, and also the initiatives that I've seen implemented. And one thing that I had the privilege of being a part of with my company, earlier this month, we had our first ever Boeing Black Employees Association Leadership Forum. I'm still learning all the acronyms. We have a lot of them. But we had over 350 African American employees from across the company, global company, meet in Washington, D.C. to sit down with leadership to talk about attracting, retaining diverse talent, and how we promote the diverse talent within the company. This was the first ever event because they, before I got there, asked for it, because it was important. So diversity and inclusion, it's part of our core value structure, but it's moving beyond the buzzword, the buzz phrase. It's moving into action. So seeing that empowered me, gives me hope every day that we're moving in the right direction and the tide is turning.
Going back to the action, I remember one of the greatest things last year was when we unveiled the Richard T. Greener statue, and just be able to be a part of that moment and just see how that's such a visible area on campus, and so many students, potential students, alumni, faculty, staff, they're all seeing that statue, and they're seeing that history that we have here, which wasn't great at the time, but we're learning from it. And I also remember President Pastides, he said one of the hardest things as president was getting the slave markers across, some of them on the horseshoe and some of them right in front of the president's house. So that was one of the hardest things to do, because people don't like change, especially when it's like that, but that action is moving us forward and having that conversation.
Yeah, so you talked about drinking your issue and clothing being authentic self. Well, New York and New York City just passed a law banning all hair discrimination. And I know for me personally, it's been really hard to navigate being natural. I've only been natural for a couple years since high school. And going to job interviews and having to switch up my hair and then literally asking my boss, is it okay if I can wear my hair navigate that in the world of journalism, especially when you're on screen and people are watching you?
I'll let you take
I'll
that
have to
one
take
in
that.
time.
Yeah.
I'll come behind
Yeah.
you.
Well, I mean, so I've had a lot of experiences, and I've had friends who've had a lot of experiences, and I'd probably say maybe 10 years, 5 to 10 years ago, where news directors had complete control over what your hairstyle looked like. So if they didn't like what they saw, they told you to change it. And there was a time where we all had the anchor bob. I mean, that's really what it was. You know, you had to have your hair relaxed or straightened in some way, and it just, you know, just a little bob. But now I'm seeing that a lot of us are able to really show who we are now, because it's being more accepted. A lot more people are taking chances, and news directors, I think a lot of them, at least the ones that I've been in contact with, are more open because they know that in order for viewers to connect, you need to be genuine and authentic. We always talk about on social media, like, we don't want to see, you know, who you think we want them to be. We want to see the true person. And so part of that is what you look like, what your hair looks like, who you are, what your beliefs are. So things have changed a little bit, which is encouraging to me in the TV world. But we definitely have a long way to go, because it starts with the hair, but it's the clothing, it's the makeup, it's the weight, it's everything. So it can be challenging to navigate, but going back to the confidence you need to have when you walk into a room, you really have to start there and know who you are. So even if you do change your hair, it's not going to change who you are.
And my hair care journey is something I could probably write a story about, but short version is I cut my hair while here at the University of South Carolina. I was in my junior year working in New York, one of the internships that Professor Giuliani encouraged me to take advantage of, and it was something that I really wanted to do for a long time, was to cut my hair off and experience what it was like to be in its natural state. For me, it wasn't the newsroom, but it was my dance studio that in 3rd grade required all children to not just straighten our hair, but to actually perm our hair before we could get on stage to do our recital, you know, and almost as if that had something to do with, you know, the performance that we were going to do, but it was part of our rite of passage. And so once I was, you know, 8 years old and got the chemical relaxer done, then that became an ongoing process, because once my natural hair grew back in, then you put some more stuff on there and you burn and all that fun stuff. And for me, I was actually coming through high school and had a little part-time job at a hairdresser. And so that particular year, because I worked at the hairdresser, they did all kind of testing of hairstyles on me at the hairdresser. So it was great because I got all these cool different hairstyles on a regular basis. But when I would go to school, it was like, you know, my hair became bigger than me, and people were like, they wanted to see, oh, what's Renea's hair look like before they, you know, paid attention to who I was or whatever. And so my hair to me became more of a distraction in that way from who I authentically was. And so around that time in 1999, I decided, you know, if there's any place in the world I'm going to do it, it will be here, because unlike today, there were not natural hair care providers. And so I had a little bit more of a chance in New York. And the freeing moment came the day I cut my hair off. I walked out of the salon. I had several people who stopped me on the street and said, oh my God, your hair looks amazing. And it was like nothing, but it was like, oh, cool. I went to a pool party, and it was for the first time ever in my entire existence that I ever felt so free at a pool. Because every time before, I either had to be prepared to go home and wash and dry and condition and sit under something, or just know that it's just going to be kind of wild and crazy for a while, or I had to wear a horrible, ugly cap that wasn't really fun, or that meant I had to sit on the side of the pool or stay in this shallow area and pray nobody splash water in my direction. And so so that sealed the deal for me personally. And so like I said, I can write a full book, but I would say that the confidence that I gained walking out of the salon, feeling pretty good about it, but getting that external feedback from people that were like, oh my gosh, you are beautiful with nothing on your head, it made all the difference. And so knowing I was going from New York City back to Columbia, South Carolina, and I was going to be looking for a job very soon, I was petrified, but I had to own it, because I knew that that's how I felt most comfortable. I wasn't going to put a wig on. I wasn't going to add extensions. You were going to get who I am. And so that took a lot of, gut, but, here I am several years later, and I can't say what I won't do, but I will say that it's worked for me, and I don't see myself going back.
Megan, you spoke a lot about if there isn't room at the table, you need to just make space for yourself. I guess it kind of goes for all of you guys. Where's been a moment in your life where you felt like there's no room here? And how are you able to get past that? How did you break through that? And I guess, how did you find a seat at the table?
I need to think about my moment.
I feel like I do it all the time. I'm personally involved in some, I would say some of my volunteer work where I'm like, that is really my mission, to create those opportunities for myself and others. And so I just think it's about being authentic, having tact, which is a skill. Everybody doesn't have it, but it's a skill that can be developed. But really being able to be visionary and what your goals are and what you're really trying to achieve, and then that way strategically aligning to achieve those goals. So I know I'm talking big picture, but specifically, it may be going into an organization that doesn't reflect a lot of people like you, but realizing that there's something that organization has for people like you, right? Or else you wouldn't be wasting your time. What's the point if it's not speaking to you or it's not helpful? And so you're there for a reason, but you also have to figure out how to use the systems in place to get you where you need to be. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of time to study how things are done, who's in charge, who you need to get to know better, what you need to read more of. And so sometimes it's not just a straight and narrow, just straight, run in and grab the first seat at the head of the table. Oftentimes it may be, hey, can we go grab some lunch together? And then now you can get a little seat moved up closer, or speaking up and, doing your homework and being able to bring something to the table that the organization needed but didn't even realize that they were missing. And so it's a very strategic process. It's a hard process, as I mentioned earlier, because oftentimes you don't typically walk in and people are like, yeah, come just take us over and show us how to do it your way, right? You really have to kind of make sure that you're bringing value and depth to what you're bringing and saying. And it's not just about the look, it's about the substance. It's okay to be in the room, but it's something different to really be at the table. You gotta be smart. You gotta bring it. So it's work. Well,
I was gonna say too, it is progress, or it's a process, and you have to keep working hard and taking advantage of all the spaces you are in. Even if that space is not at the table, it can be someday, as long as you are navigating in the right way, you're networking with the right people, and you're working hard consistently. Because I think you said it earlier, Renia, someone is always watching. Whether that is going to be your sponsor, who you may not always know you have a sponsor too. And I wouldn't say, hey, do you want to be my sponsor? Like, that's not usually how that relationship works. They have to say it to you, but it's by working really hard, and then the space just kind of gets created. But you have to be there and be prepared. So you always have to do your homework. You always have to know, who do I need to know? Who do I need to talk to? What do I need to bring to that table to make sure I am ready and that I can add value? So it's not simply just being there, but it's knowing what you're going to bring as well.
I have a question. It kind of has to do with always. I was talking with Denitra earlier about, not being so hesitant to talk to somebody because they look busy or because you're assuming that they're busy. So do you guys have any tips on when you actually have a person's time, like how do you use that time to sell yourself, even if it's just like an elevator ride or they're walking out of the door? Like, how do you sell yourself in that moment, especially when you see that they may be busy?
I remember, well, at least when I was, looking for internships and eventually jobs, one thing I tell them is like, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I'm currently doing, and a little background about what I'm doing right now, because at the end of the day, you want to get their attention, but they also usually care about what you have to bring to the table. So I would say just saying what you're currently doing, what you're seeking to do. Like, I'm an aspiring journalist, I work for SGTV right now, I love to get your business card to connect. Something simple like that to just show where you want to be and what you're currently doing.
And one of the best tools I've learned along the way in terms of networking is, when you do get that business card, don't just follow up with what it is that you want, but figure out a way that you can be helpful. And so maybe it's something you talked about together, that you can find a cool article that you can send, or some other simple way that you can kind of break through the monotony of you just being a student with this GPA trying to get this job. What's something a little extra that you can bring to the table to stand out. Again, I mentioned my Michelle Obama experience a couple of weeks ago. I literally had about 15 seconds to give my whole song and dance, thanks and praise and everything else. And so, just in line practicing, okay, I want to make sure I get in there that I just got finished working with the foundation. I want to make sure I get in there, oh my God, thank you for your book. I want to make sure I get in there, this, that, and the other, but then when it was lights, camera, action, you just have to go with it. And so, she was introduced, they say Renia Jameson, and she says, Renia, like Malia? And it's like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't practice that. Renia, like Malia, But so you just have to, you just have to go with it. But always, I think people see phony a mile away, but people appreciate authentic selves all the time. And so, just being you is all that you have to be. And the moment that you can release yourself to realize that you can just be you, then, it makes life a whole lot easier to navigate. If they don't pay you attention, if they don't give you the time of day, then maybe that's not the right fit. Maybe that's not the right place. There will be the right space for you. And so, again, as we mentioned earlier, everything is a learning opportunity. And you might see somebody and think, oh, when they come, I'm going to be there and I'm going to make sure I get with them because I really want that internship or I really want that experience. But sometimes God has something in the background for you that you didn't even know existed. I will tell you, and then I'll shut up because I know Megan's jumping at the bit to jump in here. But, I've been blessed in that I don't do much promotion for my business. I will tell you that over the last year was one of my best years, and last year I did not apply or seek out any of the opportunities that came my way. It was all based on previous experiences and relationships with people. People calling me and saying, Renia, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. And that's only because Renia always shows up just as Renia. So, there is some value that comes in being yourself and being able to be vulnerable and open with who you really are.
Well, I have nothing to add to that, really. I mean, it is about authenticity, but also knowing that you may not have a ton of time when you see that person.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can't always be about you. So have that elevator speech practiced, but sometimes you just have to go with it. And even saying something off the cuff or something that you weren't planning to say could just be that one thing that opens that door, but not always going in there with your agenda top of mind.
Yeah, one of the things I hate, just a few weeks ago, I was at a networking event and it was designed for people to come and network, but literally I hate when somebody walks up to you and just shoves their business card in your hand, in your face, and like there's no conversation, no introduction. And I remember someone doing that before we were leaving. They were just working real hard to just get their business cards in everybody's hand that was there. And I mean, this person just, it was like you just didn't even, that's when you wear that invisible cloak. Like you didn't really even exist because, yeah, I've got this card, but I don't connect this back to anything other than somebody throwing this in my hand. You know, I'd rather try to track you down than worry about the business card, but to know I had a really good conversation with somebody. I think somebody's in the room. I think it's the young lady from Columbia College. When I bumped into her tonight, I was like, I've seen you before. And I might not remember exactly what we talked about or in what setting we were in, but again, when you can make those direct impacts on people just by, you know, making those connections, that's what really matters in the end.
I have to say, sorry, it's about quality over quantity.
Definitely.
Thank you guys so much for everything. We do have some time. There's some more food in the back. We still have River Rat for a little while. So please, if you have more questions, please feel free to ask one-on-one. We can all talk a little bit more. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.